Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about painting lavender in a loose watercolor style. So grab your paints, paper, and brushes and let's get started. Okay, so first let's look at a reference image. This is online and it's a Creative Commons commercial-free image. You just want to be careful that when you're using things, especially online, that you have the rights to use them and they're not copyrighted. So looking at this image, you can see that lavender grows in clusters. They're very small little sections. So we are going to try to capture that. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is go through some practice drills. You'll need a medium-sized round brush and a little bit of watercolor paint in both purple tones and green tones. Now how you hold your brush is going to matter how you make your little lavender sections. So the first drill is going to be using the strokes and a downward angle. So you're going to pull down and just make some light strokes, and you can notice when you do this, the more pressure you put, the more that mark is going to be a wider mark, and the lighter pressure you have, it'll be a thinner mark. So I would practice this and try to make them all consistent, and this will help your brush control so that when you do the final piece, you'll have a better handle on how you want your little petals and shapes to lay. You'll also notice that the shapes are a little different from going upwards. They round out at the top, and the ones that go down round out towards the bottom, so it's more of a teardrop shape. And then using the very end of your brush, you can make some really thin marks, more like lines and strokes if you want to add some finer details. It's just really light pressure and holding your brush pointing straight vertical up and down. And then when you combine the two, you can have a light stroke and then push down for pressure, have a wider stroke, and then back to a thin stroke at the end. This will be the basic technique for making the lavender leaves. I'll make it a little bit bigger here so you can also see how you can use it for the petals by pushing down and then tapering to a little bit of a point that meet at the start of where the petals grow. And the next step would be to start adding these little clusters and stacking them. So whether you are using your brush in a downward angle or an upward angle, you'll get slightly different effects. So practice adding them in little stacked clusters. And as you saw in the reference image, the lavender kind of grows towards an angle. They're not exactly up and down straight, so they might curve to the right or they might curve to the left. Keep that in mind when you're building your little stacks of petals. Okay, so now I rinse my brush and adding some green. We're going to practice stems. In general, you'll have a really light touch, and just using the end of your brush, you can make some straight stems that may curve along with the right angle or left angle depending on the way that your lavender is growing. And then towards the base, you'll have some wider leaf shapes. And to do those, you will just need to add some more pressure on your brush so that you make a little bit of a wider mark. And you can make them somewhat of a teardrop shape and also a little floppy so they'll angle out towards the right or left as well. And just a quick reminder, remember to hit that subscribe button on my channel so you never miss a brand new video. Alright, so I'm grabbing my micron pen just to show you a little bit clearer how this cluster will grow. You're going to work in about maybe a cluster of 3 or 4 petals at a time. And then you have your thin stem that goes in between each of these little clusters. And as you move upwards, you get less clusters and smaller in size. So maybe 2 or 1 towards the top. So just keep that in mind and we can start our composition. Alright, so starting out with a bluish purple, and you can add in a little red or you can add a little blue, depends which way you want your lavender purple color to lean. Sometimes it's really nice to have a little mixture of both and you get some fun contrast that way. So I'm going to start by putting in a couple of the lavender clusters, and don't worry if they touch each other. When it's wet on wet like this, they will naturally bleed and then you'll have some really pretty color combinations happening on the page all by itself. And then with that green paint, I have added a bit of yellow to that green, so it's a little bit more of a yellow green. And also a touch of that purple into my green, just to tone it down. So that's a little trick. You can add the complementary color and it'll tone down your color so it's not so bright and vibrant. So complementary means that the colors are on the opposite ends of the color wheel, so they're directly across from each other when you're looking at a color wheel. I sort of like my colors this way. You are absolutely free to do what you like. Choose the colors that you would like to have in your composition. And then as we practiced in the drills, you'll make those thin lines for the stems and a bit wider leaves along the base towards the bottom of the lavender. If it helps to have a reference image in front of you, I recommend doing that. So go online and find something that you can feel inspired by and then refer to it if you need to. So when you're building a composition that has a lot of parts like this, I like to go back and forth between the purple and the green so I can keep an eye on how the balance of the piece is. I want to have a little bit of a dance between the two, so not too much of the petals and then not too much of the green, so I switch back and forth. One thing I do is keep the paint really light. So with watercolor, you can always go light to dark, and it's harder to take away the dark color once you've already laid it down. So sometimes, even while it's still wet, I'll go in and add some more pigment and color. And then even if it's dry, you can always go back with another layer and add some more depth that way as well. Keep taking a look at the whole piece. Step back if you need to, look at it from a distance, and that will help you see if it feels balanced or not. So if you do a lot on the left, make sure you balance out something on the right. And it doesn't have to be symmetrical unless that's what you're going for, but I'm going for more of a natural, balanced feel so that there's movement and not all the lavenders are pointing right or curving left. There's a happy mix. And another way to add some depth is to keep some really light translucent pieces as if they're in the background. And then the more pigment and color you add and the darker it gets, those lavender pieces will come into the foreground. And also same with the leaves, some really translucent off into the background, and then a few pieces that have more color and pigment and they're darker in the foreground. One of the hardest things about watercolor like this is knowing when to stop. And once you get to a point where you think, okay, that looks pretty good, maybe it's a good time to stop, take a look at it, step back, and then maybe give it a little space and then decide if you want to keep adding or not. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. And then here's a close-up of all the lavender pieces with the leaves and the blues and the purples and the different shades of green as well. And then some light and some dark, different sizes. All of these things will add to a balanced composition. Thank you for joining me and painting along. I hope you had fun, and if you recreate this, please tag me over on Instagram. I'd love to see your work. If you like this, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.